I know that we all really love the screencastify maps. However, unfortunately, my computer just is crashing out in every way, shape, and form. So, as a result, we are going to have to record this on my phone, and if the viewership tanks, then the viewership tanks, but I will show you everything on my computer. This is the 2026 Senate map, and I have to do this really quickly. So, in the safe Democratic column, I'm putting Oregon in the safe Democratic column. I'm putting Illinois in a safe Democratic column. Minnesota and Amy Klobuchar, I think that she's popular enough to be in a safe Democratic column. Delaware, I'm going to put in a safe Democratic column as well. And by the way, safe is anything above 15%. 5 to 15 is likely. 1 to 5 is lean, and then less than 1 is tilt. We're not going to put any states to the true toss-up. And those, I think, is the extent for the safe Democratic seats. I think and Massachusetts and Rhode Island, obviously, are going to be safe blue. For the safe red seats, you have your Idaho, you have Montana, Wyoming, South Dakota. I think Nebraska will be safe on second thought. You have your Oklahoma. You have, more likely than not, you have Alaska going in the safe red column. Mississippi, Alabama, Arkansas, Louisiana, Tennessee, and even with McConnell retiring, Kentucky as well as West Virginia, and I think South Carolina will also be safe. And this really puts the Democrats at a huge edge. But then you go to the likely Democratic states, and it's towards to even out. You have Colorado, you have New Mexico. I forgot Hawaii will be. Oh no, they don't have an election up. New Jersey's gonna be likely blue, I think. So that's gonna help the Democrats out. And then in the likely Republican column, you have your Iowa, you have Kansas, you have Texas, you have Florida, because I think that these states will be Republican wins, and that's already enough to pretty much give them control of the Senate. Don't forget Ohio mixed in there as well. Here's where I think that the Senate is going to go a little haywire, though. 2026, I do think will be a favorable environment for the Democratic Party. I think it will be a favorable environment for the Democratic Party. So as a result, I think really most of these states, swing states, they win. I think Virginia will lean blue. Virginia's an interesting race because a lot of it depends on the candidates that run, because we don't know a lot about Virginia yet. If Mark Warner runs, it's likely relatively safe, but he hasn't declared. Seeing as in 2020, Mark Warner won the seat by about 14 percentage points, and he won in 2014 in what was a red wave election that resulted in Democrats making massive gains in the Senate. Republicans gained, let's see, this loads. Republicans gained 9 seats in the Senate that year. They flipped Montana, South Dakota, Colorado, Alaska, Iowa, Arkansas, Louisiana, North Carolina, and West Virginia. And obviously, Democrats still maintained Virginia despite it being a favorable environment. But Glenn Youngkin, if he runs, could be a bit of a wild card. And we don't know if he's going to run yet, mainly because of, the fact that he, in a blue state, won the governor race by almost 2% against Terry McAuliffe. So clearly Glenn Youngkin can win over Democratic voters, but that was also in a favorable environment for Republicans. Can he do the same in a favorable environment for Democrats? I don't think so. It goes in the lean column. Michigan, Minnesota's an incumbent. I forgot about that. So Minnesota will, as such, be demoted down to lean Democratic. I did not realize that. And Michigan is even tighter because Michigan is an even bigger swing state. And there's, obviously wide open race with the Democratic incumbent retiring. But with the Democratic candidates being stronger than Republican candidates on average, and with it being a favorable environment, and with Michigan leaning Democratic as a whole, I do have Michigan being in the tilt Democratic column. Georgia, I think, will also be in a tilt Democratic column. I know many people are saying that Georgia is going to flip blue, and when you look at the results of the 2020 election, you can sort of see that that Ossoff narrowly won, and he wouldn't have won if not for the runoff. But there's reasons to believe why I think that Jon Ossoff will, won't win. There's reasons why I think that, like Purdue really was hampered by refusing to admit that Joe Biden had won the presidential election, as you could see, which obviously, considering that was going to affect Senate control, was a huge deal. And now we have Brian Kemp, a guy who might run, who had publicly admitted that that Biden had won the election. But Ossoff is an incumbent still, and I think that in a favorable environment for Democrats, it will give the edge to Ossoff, and I think that with all Trump's policies, he's really starting to lose a lot of his popularity. Like, if you look at 538, they have an approval rating poll, and looking at them, and nothing. Oh, you've got to be kidding me. But Trump's approval rating is declining, and generally the midterms are favorable for the opposition party anyway. 2022 is the exception, not the rule, and even then Republicans still flip the House. So in that case, I think Georgia will tilt Democratic. New Hampshire, I think, is going to lean Democratic, mainly because this is likely going to be a rematch of the 2014 Senate race in New Hampshire, and looking at that race, you have Jeanne Shaheen beating Scott Brown, who's a strong opponent. 2020, she wins in a landslide, but against a weak opponent. She wins by 16%. 2026, in a much more favorable environment for Democrats, because we know how favorable 2014 was, Scott Brown is likely to run, and Sununu, who is the most popular candidate, has declined. I really think if Chris Sununu ran, he would be able to defeat Shaheen, seeing as he won the governorship in New Hampshire, in a Republican state, and at times really won it convincingly. But Sununu's not running, so I have New Hampshire in the lean Democratic column. I think what's more fascinating in the Northeast is Maine, which I have as a tilt Republican state. And the reason why I think Maine is so fascinating is because Susan Collins is in one of those hostile states for Republican incumbents, yet she just keeps on winning. She just keeps on winning these elections, even though she really should have lost a lot of these elections by now. 2020, she holds a seat by over 8% in the Senate for Maine, even though every polling site has it either as a toss-up or flipping to the Democratic Party, and Gideon leading in most polls. And 2014, obviously, she wins in a landslide, but 2008, very favorable for the Democratic Party, and she still wins by 23%. I mean, I get politics was less polarized back then, but as much as 2014 was a red wave, 2008 was really a big blue wave across the country. Democrats gained 8 seats. They flipped Oregon, Colorado, New Mexico, Minnesota, Alaska, North Carolina, Virginia, and New Hampshire. And they gained one of the biggest Senate majorities that you'll see in modern U.S. history. So Maine, I mean, Susan Collins is very tough to get out of Maine, and for that reason, I think it's going to tilt Democratic. North Carolina, I think it's going to tilt Republican. The reason why I think North Carolina is going to tilt Republican is because Tom Tills, might be popular, but I mean, at the same time, he's also no Susan Collins. He can't win over all these swing voters the same way. It's going to be a favorable environment for the Democratic Party. And in North Carolina, former Governor Roy Cooper, who knows how to win over Democrats, could run. And, looking at the polling, Roy Cooper is beating Tom Tillis in the polls. And while the state almost always tends to back the Republican Party, it's also close. In the 2024 presidential election, for example, North Carolina backed Trump by only around 3%. In 2020, Trump won the state. It was really the only swing state that he won aside from Florida. But Trump won it by a lot less of a margin. He won by, I think 1%. Not sure when this is going to load. And I think that, he won it by 1.3%. And I think that North Carolina is a state that in a favorable environment for Democrats, they will be able to flip. But it's still only a net gain of 1 seat. And this is what I have, as my map. And looking at the consensus map, this is what they're sort of forecasting. So I'm actually relatively in step with them in a lot of ways. I'm relatively in step with them in a lot of ways with a lot of these maps. And, yeah.